I'm saying there's an empirical test you can do, which says, well, if you tried to do one thing in one city and another thing in another city, where would you find the most effective policy? And the most effective policy that you'll find when it comes to doing something like restricting water consumption is actually the kind of restrictions I've talked about. Saying, here's how you can and can't use water outside of the house. And the reason for that is because we're social animals and we don't like, as a rule, to either flout laws or, more importantly, to be seen to flout laws. So if you're the only house on the street with a green lawn in Canberra at the moment, we know what you've been doing. We know who you are. And you'll probably sneak out in the middle of the night when you think your neighbours aren't watching. Okay, and you'll tell everyone it's my washing machine water, or the soil here is particularly damp. You'll have your little lie. You'll have your little excuse. Because you know that to just say, stuff it, I'm more important than everyone else, I'm going to water my lawn, wear it, is not a very nice thing to say. The consequences of saying it are probably low. People will mutter about you after you leave, or they'll yell at you to your face, but they're not really going to come around and poison your lawn to get the bench. The point is, if you want to get away with it, you can. But most people won't. Because social opprobrium is a very important way of structuring a society. And that doesn't mean that we throw away capitalism and can't choose what we want to eat for dinner tonight. See, we're sophisticated enough to have both. That sometimes we have restrictions on behaviour, and sometimes we let individuals decide, and it's entirely up to us as a democracy to answer the question, when should we rely on which? And the fun part is everyone won't agree. The fun part is the answer changes over time. The fun part is different countries try different things and it often works in both cases. And that's okay. Alright, we just actually have to be smart enough as economists, as people interested in the environment, as citizens, to keep trying to do things a bit better, rather than think there's a magic solution out there, that there's one way of doing things. But all that was by way of introduction of talking about emissions trading schemes. Emissions trading scheme is a particular possibility for addressing climate change. I'm not going to bore you with, why we're worried about climate change. I'm sure you've heard about it. Which is nice, because 10 years ago you had to start from scratch. Everyone's got that. We're not quite sure what we're going to do about it yet. The most popular thing to want to do about it at the moment is nothing. And that's what we've excelled at doing. Alright, 1992, Australia and 170 other countries all went over to Rio and signed something at the Rio Earth Summit that committed us to tackling climate change as a matter of urgency. 1992, that accepted that climate change was caused by the release of the carbon dioxide from excessive fossil fuel use. 1992, and that what we needed to do was price pollution if we were going to do it. 1992. Also, in very big font, it said, and by the way, the rich countries should go first. This was not a loophole discovered by John Howard and George Bush about 18 months ago. The whole letting China and India move second was a fundamental part of what was agreed to in 1992, 16 years ago. Anyway, because we accepted the problem 16 years ago, because we committed ourselves to urgent action 16 years ago, because we said that poor countries should move second and rich countries should show the way 16 years ago, we've achieved nothing. Emissions have grown nearly double in that time because it was so urgent. Because we've got 170 world leaders to show up somewhere and sign something, almost unprecedented. Did all that in 1992, haven't got anywhere yet. Step 2 of doing nothing is an emissions trading scheme. Because we've got it clearly, 16 years of doing nothing, someone's going to point to the obvious. So we're going to have an emissions trading scheme. Now, I'd like to hope, I always hope I'm wrong, because I'm a pessimist. But if we look around the world, there's 2 good emission trading scheme models that we can think, what might happen here in Australia? So I want to talk briefly about them, and then I want to talk about simple solutions to actually fix things, which can involve emissions trading scheme, by the way, but an emissions trading scheme can be an elaborate way to do absolutely nothing. The Europeans introduced an emissions trading scheme, and when they did so, they basically gave away so many permits that the scheme didn't achieve anything for a long, long time. Now, I just want to talk briefly about the economics of an emissions trading scheme before I talk about why it failed. There's two ways that you can, I'll go back a step. Because we don't charge people for polluting, they do too much of it. Once upon a time, we had slavery, and that was great for people that, say, grew cotton or labour-intensive products, because if you wanted lots of cheap labour, you could go and buy it. And the only problem was that it wasn't really nice to own people. And as a society, we went, well, see all that cheap labour that you've got? We don't think it should be nearly that cheap, so we're going to have to end slavery for you. And then they had to do something really inconvenient, like invent machines to do all that work for them. We haven't charged people for polluting for a long time. They've got used to doing it for free. That's been fun. It's not working out so well for the rest of us. And we've said, hey, you know how you've been doing that dangerous thing that's hurting us for a long time? Well, we'd like you to stop. We're going to have to charge you for it somehow. We're going to have to make you internalise the costs that you're imposing on us. And there are two ways of doing it. You can set a price directly, which is called a carbon tax. So you say, look, every time you want to put a tonne of carbon dioxide in the air, that's fine, no problem, but you've got to pay us. Just like if you're going to, you water your lawn too much, we're going to charge you. So you can set a price. If you set the price, what you've then done is said, we as a society will set a price for pollution. We'll let the market then figure out how much polluting it wants to do. The main reason that most economists, and I think a lot of environmentalists don't like a carbon tax, is because if we get the price wrong, say we pick 20 bucks a tonne, if the market goes, fine, we'll pay it, we'll keep polluting, we don't actually fix climate change. So we collect a lot of revenue from a carbon tax, but if we set the price too low, we don't actually solve the problem at hand. The other option is an emissions trading scheme where rather than setting the price and then letting the market determine the quantity, an emissions trading scheme, we set the quantity. We say, here is how much polluting you're allowed to do. We're going to hand out pollution permits, but there's a finite number of those pollution permits, and it's up to you guys to figure out whether you want to buy some pollution permits before you go and do your polluting. Okay, so that way we know with certainty what the level of pollution will be. What we don't know is what the price of the pollution permits will be. We don't know how much individuals will want to put up their hand and bid to buy those permits. But it does give us the certainty of knowing, hey, we can actually restrict our pollution here. The problem is that business typically has argued very heavily and very strongly and very effectively against having a carbon tax. Oh, no, you can't have a carbon tax. It'll impose far too high cost on us. That's the point. Okay, there's no getting around this. The whole point of either a carbon tax or emission trading scheme is to increase the cost of pollution. So every time they lobby and say, but that will increase our costs, it's like, hey, you're getting it. Yeah, that's right. Once upon a time, we had dumps, and we took our rubbish to the dump, or the tip. It's called the tip or the dump because we tipped, we dumped. It was free. Now we have waste disposal facilities, and you pay a lot, and there are companies that make a lot of money. You know, Collex come along with a big hippo truck and take your rubbish away, and they charge you, and they go and get charged to dump it somewhere. Once upon a time, physical waste was free, and we changed that. That was the plan. It increased costs. That was the plan. It changed behaviour. That was the plan. Well, the whole point of doing something about carbon tax is to drive up the cost of a different form of pollution. Not physical waste that we dump at the dump, but atmospheric waste that we currently dump into the atmosphere. So, businesses lobbied very effectively saying, oh, we can't have a carbon tax, can't have a carbon tax, that would cost a lot. Yeah, it will. That's the plan.